All right, the breaking news out of football today is that legendary French defender Raphael Varane has announced his retirement at the age of 31. This comes after he suffered a disappointing groin injury in his debut 20 minutes in for Como. Had to come off that game. Haven't seen him since. And at the age of 31, Varane has unfortunately decided that it's time to end his career. Now, 31 years old is too early, really, an age for a player of this caliber to retire in normal circumstances. But when you look at the injuries that Varane has suffered, probably say over the entirety of his career, it's not really too big of a shock. However, we're talking about one of the most decorated players, not just of his generation, but probably of all time. His trophy cabinet is absolutely ridiculous. He's won wherever he's gone, and his mark on the game of football is unquestionable. But if we kind of talk about Varane's career for a second, right? Because when a player retires, it is a sad day because obviously we no longer have them in front of our televisions, getting to enjoy them. But at the same time, it's a celebratory thing as well too. Let's celebrate the unbelievable careers that these guys have had. If we take it all the way to the start, Varane was kind of regarded as really a generational or a potentially generational center back talent all the way back when he was playing for RC Lens. And he was so good that he really caught the eye of managers like Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United, who pushed really hard to sign him. Unfortunately, well, I say unfortunately as a United fan, but fortunately maybe for Varane, considering how his career went, it was actually a phone call from legendary French footballer Zinedine Zidane, serving as director of football at Real Madrid at the time, who called a young Varane at the time and suggested and recommended him to Jose Mourinho and to Florentino Perez and brought Varane there as a young teenager. Now, I think Varane, when he came into that Real Madrid team, was expected to kind of develop under the radar and kind of emerge in a few years as Real Madrid starting center back if all went well. But Varane was so incredible and so talented at such a young age that he quickly competed and then eventually displaced a legendary partnership that was kind of formed between Pepe and Sergio Ramos. And Pepe, I mean, he retired this year as well too, which kind of tells you about how crazy Pepe's longevity in this game is and how early Varane has kind of called it quits on his career. But regardless, right, Pepe and Ramos had been such a established center back partnership at Real Madrid. There was no question that they were the two best center backs at the club. And for a youngster like Varane to come in and, again, like I said, compete with Pepe from the start, but then eventually, and not that long, displace him from the starting 11 kind of just spoke to how talented Varane was at such a young age. And it was evident, right, from early that this kid had an unbelievable ability to read the game defensively. His positioning was absolutely sensational, but more so than anything, for me, Varane's standout quality has always been his recovery pace. And especially when you're partnering a player like Sergio Ramos, the captain of Real Madrid, a guy who often got the headlines, right? A, because of his goals, B, because of his more flamboyant, expressive manner. He was in your face, he was aggressive, he was more rough riding than Raphael Varane, who was both in personality and style of play a bit more under the radar, a bit smoother, a bit less expressive. But that's really what makes a great center back partnership. The two of them are yin and yang. The two of them just seem to get each other. They magnified one's strengths while minimizing the other's weaknesses, which is really what you want from a top-class center back partnership. But from the start, you could tell that Varane would be invaluable to Real Madrid because when Ramos tended to go forward, play those crazy passes over the top, or even maybe get caught out higher up the pitch trying to make a slide tackle and the other team kind of breaks, you had Varane as the ultimate insurance policy to Ramos. Incredibly fast, incredibly intelligent in picking his moments to kind of dive in. And again, like I said, he was the ultimate foil to the more aggressive and more expressive Sergio Ramos. And if I were to describe Varane's career in one word or one term, it's serial winner. Serial winner. That's the only way I can describe Raphael Varane. 4 Champions League titles, 3 La Ligas, over 200 appearances for Los Blancos, and an ever-present in that back line as well too, the most important thing. Varane is undoubtedly one of the great center backs of his generation, and you can't describe his career without talking about those glorious years that he spent kind of marshalling the back with Sergio Ramos at Real Madrid. There was always a question mark with Varane, though, I think, especially from the wider public, about how good really was he, because he plays for Real Madrid, so of course he's going to win everything. And he plays with Sergio Ramos, and he's never been better than Ramos. He's always been the B side. Like, is this guy really that elite of a center back? But I think Ramos will tell you himself, and I think Real Madrid fans will tell you himself, that this guy was integral. Like I said, Ramos would always get the plaudits, and rightfully so. Right? He's, again, an all-timer central defender. But when you're the guy popping up with the goals, when you're the guy who wears the armband, who wears his heart on his sleeve, who's the shouter, who's the aggressor, the commander in the back, of course you're going to get more plaudits and more attention than a guy who a lot of Real Madrid fans might even call mute. On the pitch, you don't really see Varane raise his voice. You don't really see Varane go to ground super easily. You don't see Varane really scoring that many goals, although he did pretty well to score 20 goals throughout his career. But he's just a much more quiet foil to the more aggressive Sergio Ramos, a bit like how Gerard Piqué was to Carlos Puyol. But Barcelona fans will tell you how important Puyol was to them, just how important Varane was to Real Madrid. And then, of course, he made his move to Manchester United in 2021, a move that he kind of described as one that was kind of like a dream for him. Obviously, Man United had shown interest early in his career, but when Zidane and Real Madrid come knocking, you don't tell them no. However, this was a move that Varane immediately expressed he was super keen on. He was super happy to make that move. And you always got the impression, and I'll say it myself as a United fan, that Varane really, A, understood the magnitude of the club that he was at, and B, really loved playing for Man United. Like, I think he really treated it as an honor. And when you look at the big name players that have come to United in the last 10 years post-Fergie, you do get the impression that sometimes they may be coming for a paycheck or they may be coming for a status upgrade. But Varane was a guy that already had all of that stuff at Real Madrid. And coming to Man United, I really feel like he embraced the club, embrace the supporters. I mean, from the first day when he was unveiled in front of a fully sold out crowd at Old Trafford against Leeds, and he was taking selfies and dapping up Rio Ferdinand, like, you just got the impression that yes, we were signing a world-class, world-renowned center back, but also he was coming here with a point to prove. And look, it wasn't always super successful for Varane at Man United. I mean, you look at his 3 years at the club, 2 of them, Man United finished outside of the top 4, suffered some heavy defeats, which unfortunately at times he was a part of. But one thing with Varane that you could never really question is that when he was fit, which was always the issue, but I would say when he was fit, the guy put in top-class performances for us, especially once Eric Ten Hag came in. That partnership that he put in alongside Lisandro Martinez was unquestionable. When the two of them were playing together, that looked like Man United's best defensive partnership post-Rio and Nemanja Vidic. And again, just like it was with Sergio Ramos, Varane was just the perfect foil for the more aggressive, more expressive Lisandro Martinez. It was just a perfect partnership. And again, like I said, not the most successful years at Man United, like not, especially compared to his Real Madrid stint, but you look at it still, the guy left with 2 trophies in 3 years, and he had a massive part to play in both of them. A massive part. The cup final against Newcastle, the Carabao Cup, which broke Man United's 7-year duck for a trophy. Varane was integral to that. And then you look at the FA Cup final last season. His last, in fact, full 90-minute game came in an FA Cup final win against Manchester City, who were just coming off winning a 4-peat of Premier League titles, facing the best striker on the planet in Erling Haaland. And Varane, alongside Lisandro, but Varane in particular, did such an incredible job to the point that United fans were saying maybe we should be keeping him longer because yes, he's injury prone and yes, he's aging, but when he does play, he's capable of putting in performances like this. Varane and Lisandro locked up Erling Haaland that day. And Erling Haaland, who the last 2 years had no issues scoring against Man United, but in that performance in particular, Varane showed his class, ultimately for one last time, but showed how brilliant, especially in the box of a defender, the guy actually is. In the air, incredible. Last-ditch slide tackles, always ever present. Just reading the game in particular, I can't think of many defenders of his generation that read the game from a defensive standpoint as well as Raphael Varane did. But I can't speak about Varane without speaking about as well too his France career. And when you look at it, right, I mean, I remember Varane as far back as 2014, but it might have been even earlier, 2013, I would say. So an international career that stretched to almost a decade. And he was never present in the 2014 World Cup. He was never present in the 2018 World Cup, which he won, but we'll get onto that. The Euros, the World Cup in 2022 as well, too. Winning the Nations League in 2021. But his crowning moment ultimately came in the 2018 World Cup, where France defeated Croatia in the final 4-2. And Mbappe got the headlines because he was the kid wonder that was just breaking Pele's records left and right. Pogba played an incredible tournament. Griezmann with big goals in the final. Kante was all over the place. Umtiti's header against Belgium. But for me, genuinely, I don't know if he was in the team of the tournament, but for me, he definitely should have been. And one of the best performers at that entire tournament for me was Raphael Varane. So dependent, so calm, so imposing in the back, a real just level-headed, mature head to kind of just calm everybody down around him. Whenever the danger is around me, trust me, I'm Raphael Varane. Raphael Varane. I got that. And look, again, it's another case of people looking at that tournament and saying, well, was he even better than Samuel Umtiti, per se? But when Varane is consistently one of the constants in all these great center-back partnerships, whether it was Ramos, whether it was with Umtiti, whether it was later on with Lisandro Martinez, even in the World Cup in 2022, next to Dayo Upamecano, you can argue all you want about who you thought was the better of the two. But if Varane is consistently a constant in all of these partnerships that are going on to achieve success, at some point it can't be a coincidence anymore. At some point you can't keep saying, oh, these guys are carrying Varane, if Varane is consistently the guy next to them. And I think that's the thing with Varane, right? Because he's not the loudest, because he's always been a calm guy, someone that you hardly see raise his voice, someone that doesn't really just lunge to the ground all the time. He's not scoring these crazy goals. I always felt like his reputation never really matched how good of a player he actually was. And when a player retires, I think that's ultimately when they get their flowers, and sometimes it ultimately ends up coming too late. But like I said, if I had to describe Varane one way, it would have to be serial winner. And if you're going to describe him with anything, it's his resume. The amount of trophies that this guy won throughout his career. Before that FA Cup final, that World Cup final against Argentina, I believe Varane had a record in finals of 14 finals won. Again, whenever he played on big occasions, his team, more often than not, ended up winning. Again, you can say everything you want about Varane, but if you're a constant in the most successful teams throughout your career, you're not there by chance. You're there on merit. And that's my view on Raphael Varane. So like I said, there's going to be center backs that in 10, 15, 20 years time will probably get more adoration and probably get more love than Varane. But when you talk about the most successful teams, when in 30 years we're talking about that three-peat Real Madrid Champions League winning team, don't forget who was partnering Ramos in every one of those. For the most part, the duration of those campaigns, it was Varane. When you talk about the 2018 World Cup, yeah, you talk about Mbappe. Yeah, you talk about Pogba. Who was the guy that scored the winner against Uruguay? Who was the guy that was the constant in defense the entire time? It's Raphael Varane. The bigger point to kind of take out of this, though, in my opinion, and like I said, congratulations on the next part of your career for Raphael Varane, or I should say good luck instead. I do believe he's going to take a more like a non-footballing role at Como. I wish him all the best for that. But for me, the bigger conversation here, and not to take too much time on this, has to be yet another player kind of bowing out this early in his career. We saw Eden Hazard last year, a player that was hacked mercilessly throughout his career, that eventually had to bid adieu to the game at around 30, 31 years old as well. You've seen Raphael Varane now as well, too, having to say goodbye to the game at 31. And this is a player, Varane, that throughout his career suffered injuries. He's spoken multiple times about how at this point in his career and now post-career, his body has effectively broken down. He's literally used the word damaged to describe his body due to his footballing career. And in fact, he's been a huge advocate, not only about footballers playing way too many games, which is something we're going to touch on, but also the dangers of consistently heading the ball throughout your career. Varane has talked about suffering concussions multiple times. In fact, 2014 in the World Cup against Nigeria, he described himself as having a concussion midway through that game and actually playing the remainder of that game basically on autopilot. He really didn't know where he was. I think he's also kind of hinted at that game against Manchester City where he made two really big mistakes against City to allow Jesus and I think it was Sterling to kind of knock Real Madrid out. But I think he's even talked about that game where, look, physically, his head was not in the right place. He may have been suffering with a concussion during that game. And he's kind of been an advocate that footballers, like he tells his son apparently, don't head the ball. Don't head the ball unless you absolutely have to, because the long-term effects of it are absolutely devastating. But then you also look at the injury to Rodri this week that he suffered against Arsenal, an ACL injury that's going to rule him out for the next basically 365 days. He won't be back until next season. Rodri, of course, has again been a player that has said players are playing too many games in today's era. I think there has to be a bigger conversation here that we can't keep seeing the biggest stars of this game either miss mass amounts of time off due to injury and then ultimately have to basically bow out of the game at such a young age because we are running them into the ground. What's going to be the breaking point, the boiling point that makes the officials that run FIFA, that run UEFA, take a step back and say, this is getting out of hand? The amount of games and competitions that we keep adding onto the average player's yearly calendar is starting to become a joke. Just a few examples. The Champions League now adding 2 extra games for every single team. They can claim all they want that it's about, improving the product. But the reality is, it's just to put more games on TV that's ultimately going to bring in more revenue to themselves. Who is benefiting from that? Maybe the fans that get to watch more games, sure. Maybe you guys who get to pocket in more money. But are the players benefiting anything from that? I don't think so. You look at the recently created UEFA Nations League. I think back to 2019, I think it was created. I mean, it's a nice award to win. Portugal brought it home. France, Varane himself brought it home. But was that really a competition that any football fan or any player was crying out for? Is that something that the game absolutely needed? I'd argue no. You now talk about the Club World Cup, which has added 10 more teams or something like that? It's no longer now just the champion of each continental competition. You're now adding 3-4 teams from every single continent. Again, is this for the players' benefit or is it from the competition's benefit? I just think we're rapidly getting to a place in football where players are now becoming products rather than the main attraction of the game. Let's not forget that without the players, we can talk about without the fans, football is nothing, and that's true. But without the players, it's even less. So Rodri has hinted recently that maybe we're approaching a point where players even start boycotting. They start basically saying, I'm not going to play these games. I refuse. And at that point, what do? You can't ban players because without the players, the game's gone. The game's gone. And I really hope, look, Varane is 31, and it's a shame that he's retired this early, but it could have been worse. Let's be real. Hazard was 31, 32 as well, too. The last thing we want is for this, especially now, this incredible young generation kind of coming through of the Lamines and the Estevãos and the Endricks, and even a little older, the Musialas, the Jude Bellinghams, the Viniciuses. The last thing we want is for one of these guys to be absolutely just run into the ground, and we're absolutely robbed of a transcendent talent that was bound to have this incredible career and rewrite the sport with their name in it. At 25 years old, their body just breaks down because they're playing 60, 70 games a season. That's the last thing anybody wants. So I really hope it doesn't take more players like Varane kind of having to call it quits because of repeated injuries. But I do fear that the way the trajectory is going, it's more likely for that to happen than for the opposite. So, like I said, not to take too much away from Varane's retirement because that's really what this video is about. But let's keep that in the back of our minds. We're seeing it more and more and more and more. And at the end of the day, yes, footballers are paid incredible amounts of money. They live lives and earn salaries that regular people could only dream of. But they are not machines. They are not products for our own enjoyment. They are still human beings made out of flesh and bone. And I think the last thing any of us wants is for our entertainment and these big, massive corporations, their revenue, to basically suddenly become more important than the players' welfare. That's all I'm saying. However, to summarize this, big good luck to Raphael Varane on this next step of his career. Thank you, merci, for everything that you've done to the sport. Again, you've written your name in the history, in French football history, and Real Madrid's history, and ultimately football in general's history. And you'll be missed. And thank you, of course, as well, too, for delivering Man United, or helping deliver Man United's last trophy to date. That being said, myself, Lyes, and we'll see you soon. Peace.